And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and YouTube at realestateshowOregon.com. I'm Pete Belcastro. This is Alice Lema. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. We get together with you once a week to talk about our favorite subject, which is Southern Oregon real estate, as we come to you here at the end of February, heading into March. Spring, it seems like, in the air. Anyway, Alice.
Oh, it's just been beautiful.
Hasn't it, this week? Wow, we've been lucky. We still need snow in the mountains. We still need more. So don't you go thinking it's all over here. It's going to be spring now, because we don't want that.
We do need some more water.
We need a lot more water. As we say, everybody's happy when we have a lot of water around our region, that's for sure. Well, anyway, today here, James Stout is an attorney in Medford. He's been on our show before, almost about a year ago, it seems like, when Senate Bill 608 became law, in which created Oregon's first statewide, the nation's first statewide rent control laws. And here we are a year later. We're going to talk about what happened. Each of us had a different experience probably over the course of the year. And of course, you may have also had one yourself, because it really changed the landscape for renting, investing, litigating. I mean, you name it.
For buying and selling.
It really had an effect, right?
Buying and selling investment properties.
Okay, is that fair? Is that
yeah,
fair?
That's absolutely.
Sum up, all right? Your experience as well. So, James, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
Then make sure you talk into that thing there. So,
okay.
Yes, sir, it really was. It's been a year. It's hard to believe that. There was such gloom and doom. Alice was a gloom and doomer. weren't you? You gloomed and doomed a year ago.
I had a lot of investors that were worried. What were you hearing back then before the year started?
Nobody really knew what it was or how it was going to work, and so we had a lot of uncertainty. I'm kind of hate to tell you that we really haven't learned a whole lot since then, because there haven't been any Court of Appeals cases. It's just been too short, so nothing's been decided. With this law, you get different responses and different rulings from different courts in different counties, and even, with the judges in Jackson County, sometimes they don't agree on what it means. So it's very difficult for us to advise clients, advise landlords of, what's going to happen.
What are some of the most commonly asked questions right now?
A lot of it is from people that are buying, and there's a tenant in there, and that 608 also took away the no-cause eviction. So if you have somebody in there and you want to sell and they've been in there over a year, it's difficult to get them out. And there are some things you can do, but it's a 90-day notice. And as you know, that's created a big problem trying to, number one, get somebody to wait for 90 days. My understanding is they lose their loan locks.
Yeah, the lenders are not happy about 90-day locks.
Yeah, and so people have lost a lot of sales. Even if you do give the proper notice, if the tenant moves out, sometimes the buyers get fed up and go someplace else.
Well, we just had a situation yesterday where the tenants left, and they left such a mess and destroyed the property. But when we went back and looked at the original pictures, they had hidden everything. They had covered everything up, and then they left, and now here we're supposed to close, and the buyer's not sure they want the property because it's been damaged.
Yeah.
So I gave him your number.
Oh, perfect. But yeah, that's one of the issues. The other one is if they can't raise the rents up to market value, does it pencil for them to buy it? If they're looking at that as an investment property and it doesn't pencil, they're not going to do it. And so that's created some problems.
Yeah, sometimes those buildings are hard to sell because they don't have the right spread, if you will, of profit for the investor.
Yeah, if your return's not there, why would you do it?
Right. And they're valued, when you buy something as an investment and you're getting a loan for that, the appraiser wants to look at the rents as well. They do a rent analysis to see if the building's worth it.
Yeah, and if you can only raise the rent, now it's, this year I think it's 9.9%. So depending on where the rents were, in a lot of these places, I have a lot of clients that are mom and pop landlords, and they haven't raised rents in 10, 12 years. Now they have to, especially if they're going to sell it, because the rent's so low and you can't raise it. It's not really, it doesn't make sense.
You guys jumped into all sorts of things like that, and I want to make sure that kind of everybody understands what in the world you're talking about. The first thing you were talking about was if I'm a mom and pop renter, if I'm a mom and pop landlord, as you're talking about, and I have a renter in there right now who's been there for years, if I want to sell the place, the renter has to stay there. Is that correct?
No, but if you're the rule is now, if you have an offer, you have to give the tenant 90-day notice with the offer, basically
Right.
saying that you have a bona fide offer to sell it, and then they have 90 days to pack up their stuff and get out.
But isn't that, now I heard that if that's the case though, but if I sell it to another investor, then the tenant has the right to stay, correct?
Yeah.
They only evict it if I say I'm the landlord, and I say I'm the landlord and I sell to you, and you're going to move into the property. That's when you can then have the 90-day you have to leave, correct?
Yep.
Right, Alice? Is that
But
right?
but it used to be that when you were selling something or buying something that had a tenant in it, you could ask the tenant to leave and you could get your own tenant. So it seems a little unfair now that the law makes you, if you're an investor, it makes you take that tenant. So what happens if you vet the tenant, you ask them for a new criminal record, or how does that work? If you're in escrow and you do a background check of the tenant and it turns out there's something in the background, can you evict them then, or is it you just have to go to a different building?
Yeah, not unless they lied on the application and said they didn't have a record when they did.
Oh, okay.
That's still grounds for termination. But yeah, if you have a year lease, you're not going to get that person out anyway. So the new buyer just takes it with the new tenant in there, and hopefully, their return is such that they'll do the deal.
All right. What about if I could? Alice rents. I mean, you're a landlord.
Depends
is
on how
what you
things
are.
go. I might rent.
But you've done this. But you've done this a lot. So let's say I've got somebody in there, okay, a renter in there, and I sell it to another investor. Can I negotiate with my tenant to get them out early? Have people been doing that? Because it says you can, and I'm just curious if you've had any experience of that type of thing. And do you pay like a 2 months rent? Can you help them, or what can you do to speed that up? So the problems that you guys said earlier, you lose deals because buyers get anxious or whatever, and the deals go south.
Yes, that's happened, and I kind of forgot your question, but I was thinking about your answer, and I forgot.
Negotiating with the tenant to get them out, to get somebody out
and
early.
so we've done that quite a bit.
You do, okay.
Yeah. And so it just depends on the price, how much you want to pay the tenant to get them out. And some of them will take the deal, and some of them won't. The problem that you run into is that there's no place for them to go.
Oh, sure.
The vacancy rate, I think the last one I heard from the rental owners was 3%. So you just can't pack up and leave in 30 days. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And I forgot that. That's the other end
Well,
of it.
and if your rents have been really low, then the tenants are upset because they feel that they're going to have to pay exponentially more because they're going out into the open market, and they cause a lot of ruckus and are very unpleasant. It's hard to do showings.
Right, yeah, you can't get in. And that's the problem with, like I said, some of my clients have not raised rent for 10 years or 15 years. And so they're well below market value. And, the tenants go out and they try to find some place and they kind of get sticker shock, and then where are they going to go?
Now, when you said it's below market, the rent's below market value there. So if I'm a landlord and I haven't raised my rent in a long time, I can raise it 10%. But what if I don't raise it? And if I sell it and the tenant stays there, you cannot raise that rent beyond the 10% or kind of thing like that. You can't readjust it.
Nope.
Can you? That's correct, right?
Yep. You stay at the whatever the rent is, and then you can raise it. Now it's 9.9% per year.
And okay, go ahead.
Well, I just want so if you do your rent increase and you do it incorrectly, let's say you accidentally go 0.1% too high as a landlord, what are some of the consequences of doing your rent increase incorrectly?
Well, number one, it's not effective. So if you try to evict them for non-payment of rent, you get hit with attorney's fees and costs.
Oh, really?
And there's also statutory penalties for doing that. So you have to be careful, and my advice is if it's 10%, go at 9.5. That way there's nothing that can happen. And a lot of landlords have utilities in there, something like that, so that's included in the rent.
Okay.
And if you make that mistake and you include that, you're going to be up over the 10%. And so you've got to be careful. So it's been an education for landlords, and we've done a lot of seminars, trying to educate them. There are a lot of landlords that are not part of the Southern Oregon rental owners, and so they kind of don't know what's going on, and they get into trouble.
Yeah, and you want to avoid that. I mean, that's what we're talking about this today, is try to avoid those issues and problems. Have you seen a lot of court cases come up over the course of the year? Has there been much activity there, or tell us where that is, James?
No, usually what happens is if the landlord makes a mistake, they get a letter from an attorney. They come in to see me or somebody else, and we say, "Whoop, you made a mistake. Write the check and do it right."
And don't do it wrong again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to solve, isn't it?
But
And that's the right way.
Yeah, well, if you go to court on something like that, it's just going to
not
cost you
worth
more.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
you've already lost.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't do it right, so you've already lost.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah. Just-
So are giving notices any different? Because it used to be you could just post something on somebody's door. Is that still the case, or do you have to have additional?
Well, if you're
Ways of notice.
if you're giving a termination notice, that has to be served correctly. So it's either mail, you can mail it, nail and mail, which is post and mail. If your rental
Nail
agreement,
and mail.
if your rental agreement says you can do that,
Some agreements
or you
do.
can hand it to them,
Yeah.
but you can't post it on their door. The notice of entry. So if you want to go in and show it,
Uh-huh.
that you can post, or you can do it by text or email or any method that lets them.
But the termination, you have to,
You have to do it correctly, and that hasn't changed.
and that's in person.
Nail and mail, if your rental agreement allows it, and that's not as easy as it sounds, because a lot of people don't have rental agreements that comply with the law. So
Some people don't have rental agreements at all.
I know.
I bet there's a lot of places that don't have rental
Those
agreements
keep the
out
lights
there.
on.
Oh, yeah.
It keeps you working.
That's
doesn't
right,
it?
yep.
Yeah, again, gosh, these are such. I mean, renters know the rules. Most of them don't they?
Yeah, and you know what? 99 or 98% of the renters are just great people.
Yeah,
It's the 2% that ruin it for everybody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so negotiating with them, that's worked. I've seen people pay, $5, 6, 7, $10,000 to get them out.
Oh, my
but
goodness.
if you're selling a fourplex or something, that's that's the
Right.
price of doing business. So that's just the way it is.
We've got a break coming up here, but did the new law, did Senate Bill 608, did it change the way apartment complexes are rented or anything like that?
I don't think so.
It had no effect there, just on single, I guess, residences or duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes then, right?
Yeah, any residential
Okay.
rental, regardless of what it is.
Okay.
As long as you're under ORS Chapter 90, it applies.
Yeah, but you both have said that you've seen a lot of rent increases that sometimes people didn't really do because of the law.
Yes, especially for the people that haven't raised rents for a long time. They've had a person in there for 10 or 15 years, and they've kept it low. Now, they really can't do that, because it takes you so long to get it up to market value at 10%. It's going to take, what is that, 7 years for it to
Yeah.
double?
Especially as an investment property there, you're not keeping up with it. It's like being in the restaurant business, like we go through, you better keep raising your prices or you're not going to be there. You have to stay up with what's happening around you or you're going to fall behind. Absolutely true. Very good. That's very good advice there. We're with attorney James Stout today on the Real Estate Show. Pete and Alice, we're coming right back with more, talking about the first anniversary of Oregon's landmark statewide landlord tenant laws. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you here today. Thank you for joining us. We had quite an event this last week. John L. Scott had their big kickoff to the season. That was a lot of fun. A lot of agents there. And,
Great bacon, as always. John L. Scott always gives us the best bacon in the valley.
Yes, it's off to the 2020. We're getting to that selling cycle. We're waiting for the spring selling season to spring upon us. March, April, and May. We're just about there. So we look forward to see what the market does, what the market is doing. Today we're talking with attorney James Stout and about the first anniversary of Senate Bill 608. That was the craziest law that went into effect. It created Oregon's and the nation's first statewide rent control laws. It was so weird because I've never seen a bill in all the years of covering the legislature as a reporter and things like that. They passed the bill. It went into effect like 2 weeks later without any rules, and nobody knew what in the world to do except it had taken effect, right? Isn't that crazy?
Well, they didn't allow any amendments.
Nothing.
They didn't.
Right, and no amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the cap and trade thing they're doing now. They're not taking any amendments, and we'll see next year. I don't think they're doing much in this short session, but I think maybe they'll make some adjustments next year, hopefully.
I hope so. I hope they give a good
Yeah.
look at it, and I hope people will give input on.
And what
on
might
this.
they change?
I don't know. I have some things I wish they would. That 30
would
day,
they-
that,
what
that
would they
30
do?
day no cause notice is a problem for the people that are going to sell or remodel. It's just harder, and it's just more regulation. So it's just making everything harder, and I don't think it benefits the tenants at all. I mean, that law was supposed to help the tenants, and it's going to make it harder for them.
Well, and so many landlords started selling their buildings, and you can see almost every tax cycle, there's another like swell of buildings that go on the market. They're getting scooped up pretty fast, but it just seems like there's really no difference in the inventory, the amount of inventory for tenants.
Yeah, I think it's gone down, in my opinion, because I've had clients that have said, I'm done, and they've just sold their units. So, if there's 10, 20, 100 units that are off the market, how did that help? It didn't help anything. And I know you said earlier that you've had a lot of landlords that have just
The older
sold.
ones, and they don't have 10 and 15 years to do those regular increases so they can be at market value. So they're just calling it quits.
Yeah.
So you wanted more long-termers to took their place, right?
Yep, and
more
those new
long-term
people are
investors.
willing to play ball with the state of Oregon, but there's a huge concern with the new batch of landlords that the state of Oregon is going to continue to change it in a non-profitable way, and then they're going to get stuck with these buildings they can't sell at all, and they don't have any profit. So there's a huge worry about that.
Well, did you hear what Seattle did?
What's Seattle do?
Seattle made a ruling that you can't evict for non-payment of rent from December through March. So-
3 months worth of
Yeah.
non-payment of rent.
Yep. So if they don't pay the rent, you file the eviction. They basically file an answer that says you can't do that for 3 months, and it gets put on hold. I don't know what the landlord's supposed to do if they can't make their mortgage payment.
Right.
And I guess by some miracle, the tenant's going to come up with 3 months' rent after the end of that and pay it all back.
Probably not.
Nope. So,
It just creates more and more litigation,
So did
more
they-
and more,
well,
issues, and more
and
and more problems.
Portland's looking at that.
I wouldn't
And
doubt
whatever
that.
happens in Portland's going to filter down to the rest of us sooner or later.
Oh yeah, we get the effects of that on a lot of things, and up from California. By the
Yeah.
way, did you know that there was a little article in the Mill Tribune this week that the state of California, you start in new construction, you have to put solar panels, on all new construction.
You have to.
Well, not exactly. And, they've gotten around that you can buy credits like cap and trade. Someone's going to create a solar farm, and you can buy credits from the solar farm for your house, so you don't actually have to put the solar panels on the house. I mean, it
Brilliant.
never ceases to amaze me. I just want to get your comments about home ownership, okay? Because it's how you create wealth for yourself and your family is buying something and beginning with real estate, right? I mean, that's why we do this a lot. So what do you think the U.S. home ownership, what percentage of the U.S. population owns a home, would you say?
I would say 60 to 65%.
Okay, you're close. James, what do you think it is?
Probably 50.
Well, oh gosh, if it was.
In Klamath Falls, it is.
Well, no, right now it's 65%.
Oh.
Okay.
But it's up. But it hit the peak in the United States at almost 70% in 2004, right before
The crash.
big crash. 70%. And then it dropped off to 63% by 2016. And I remember the stories came out about the millennials, nobody's buying. They're not going to replace. How are they going to replace all the baby boomers' homes? Remember all those talking about here in the show and stuff like that. It's come back up. I think they were wrong, because how else are you going to be able to create wealth for yourself?
Well, and I think there's plenty of millennials that want to be landlords as well.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting kind of organic movement happening in our society where the elders are going back and living with the family for their end of life choices.
Yeah.
And so some of these multifamily complexes are being scooped up and turned into basically family compounds, and they're not available for rent.
Okay, well.
And the millennials are going to inherit that. There's a lot of that family purchase thing going on right now.
Yeah, I saw something about the old Vanguard back east with these big, huge mansions and stuff like that, and then they get the kids don't want them.
No.
They don't want to live there. They don't want to. They
No.
don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
53% of U.S. homes are owned by people over 50. Okay.
Really?
So it's Gen X and baby
that's how
boomers.
much. And it was like, who's going to replace all? Who's going to buy these homes? We think we've reached that price ceiling. You know, you can only go up so high, and then nobody can afford it.
Right.
Do wages keep up with that? It's so fascinating how it works, and we're at that stage. It seems like. I don't know if we are or not, but it seems like we are.
Well, in Southern Oregon, our wages are, what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't grow as much as maybe as they do in other places. So, but still, as Alice alluded to, we have a higher home ownership rate in Jackson County than they do in Josephine County than they do in Klamath County. So it ranges from around that 65%, we're about average here, to 50% in Klamath County. So, home ownership is certainly a way to get to, again, create wealth for you and your family, and a way to do it. Rentals are perfect for many people. We understand that, but also they're great investments for.
Well,
others.
and it's a service you're providing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it really is a service. And we talk about the mom and pop landlords where they have another duplex or another little cottage or something, and it's not just income for them. They're helping to provide housing.
Well, and that's the thing is, what they should do is make it easier for you to get a rental, not harder.
Yes.
No.
It's just common sense, I guess. But
It's like anything else out of the world. Since we've got you here, I just want to kind of change the subject for just a second, because planned unit developments, PUDs, the way Oregon law now, that you can create more lots onto a single family, more units onto a single family lot. Remember that law was passed this last legislative session, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any experience with that yet? Have you haven't
No.
had anybody come forward how to plan those things? The reason I say that is that we just had an experience with a friend of ours who's trying to do that in Ashland.
So they're trying to put more than
Yeah, 3, remember?
Right, on one tax lot.
On one tax lot.
Right, so that's the new law where you can have up to 4.
Yeah, but then
Theoretically.
but then they're changing them where you have to sell them. They're not rentals, they're not condos. They are single family homes on tiny lots, 400 square feet, things like that. That's what we're getting into now. So it'll be fascinating to see as you go along how that's going to work.
so they make you sell them.
Yes, well, you sell them. Yeah.
Okay. You can't subdivide it and then keep them.
Well, it's not single family residences. You don't sell real estate with them then.
Yeah.
You see?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That was one of those.
Yeah. No, I
You haven't had any with that.
No, I haven't been involved in it. Usually they go to a land use planner or somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't do land use, so.
Yeah. Probably smart on your
Oh,
part.
I hated it.
Whether you wanted to do that as well. Well, I'm just encouraged. I know Alice has deals with a lot of investors, and I hope that people will realize, and you are correct, that the investors still are out there and need them. But you were also right, Alice, that a lot of families are buying duplexes.
And fourplexes and 3. Yeah, they're buying everything.
For family units.
Mm-hmm.
They may take 2 of them even, for fourplex, things like that. So some of those do come off the market. So we certainly have a shortage. Don't you think that we have a shortage in this type of housing here a lot?
Well, if your vacancy rate's 3%, you do.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that it really affects my business and my clients is if you want to remove somebody for whatever reason, and I'm not talking about they're not paying rent or they do something wrong. If you just need to get them out and sell it or refurbish it or do something, there's no place for them to go. So you get a lot of pushback from the tenants, and it's not their fault. I mean, there's just no place for them to to go.
And that is no different from when we talk about other housing. Where do seniors go when they want to downsize their place? Where do you go? I was in an independent living place this week showing a friend of mine, and boy, those prices have gone up, Alice, in independent living. So it's limited. People don't. Now they're getting to the point where if you have your Social Security, you work, you have your Social Security, you have a small pension. Now you're over. It used to be able to cover living in an independent living place for a senior. Now it doesn't.
Yeah, and I have a lot of seniors and some of the more vulnerable renters that are actually leaving the area because they just have to. And whether no matter what you think of that is just the natural flow of things. If we were in San Francisco and we could not afford the rent there, we would relocate to Medford, Oregon, or we would go to someplace else in the United States that we could afford. So I just think there's a natural ebb and flow of people being transient that way. but they are not able to stay in Medford. And it's not just renters, it's some of our elderly.
And you're absolutely right. You're right there, Alice, and that's what we're seeing. And I think it's tragic.
So
really,
what have you seen that there's more people leaving or more people coming in?
Overall?
Yeah.
More people.
I have more people leaving.
I was going to say more people coming in. I think it's a lot of both.
That's interesting.
About 40% of our sales traditionally have been from out of areas, people moving in here. 60% people going up and down. That may have changed in the last few years as more people are kind of going out.
Because 40% is high.
Yeah,
well, and I'm just one real estate agent, so
yeah.
I'm not a scientific sample.
No,
but by any means.
But when your client's doing this to you, and you see what's happening and where they go and what their options are, boy, we are really limited.
And some of it is property taxes. The property taxes for a lot of people, especially if they're at retirement age, they really do start looking at Idaho, Montana, Texas, places like that are more affordable.
Yeah, what is it, 3% a year? Just goes up 3% every year?
Which is why you have to raise your rent.
Yeah.
It's the 3% creep, and absolutely. So that 10% that you would get, you could raise your rent. You're not getting that 10% as the landlord. You're right. Property taxes get 3% of that. Absolutely. It's kind of like a never-ending thing, isn't it? It's just... that's why you got to be a good operator. You got to know what the heck you're doing if you get into the business. But it's also can be a very rewarding, right?
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about what advice you have for people just starting in the landlording business and how things have changed and maybe how they can protect themselves, but also provide a good service.
But you got to do that when we come back because we got a break coming up first. Real Estate Show, one more segment to go. Pete and Alice here talking with James Stout, an attorney here in Medford, about Senate Bill 608, his first anniversary, and a whole bunch more than that as well. We're coming right back after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema here with you today. Thank you for joining us here as we continue our March of spring of 2020 in the real estate market in Southern Oregon. We're with James Stout, who's an attorney here in Medford, talking to us about Senate Bill 608, the statewide rent control law that's 1 year old. Amazing how...
Maybe we should have brought a cake.
Amazing how a year goes by. Before the last segment, Alice had a great question for you. I want to make sure that I'd like to hear your answer from it. She asked you about first-time people, first-time investors. Your advice to them about what to look for, kind of as they get involved with that, because I think investing is a great way to earn some money for people, and I do not want to be here to say that it's not a good thing to do. Okay? What do you think?
No, it's a great thing to do, but I think the people that are first coming in, they need to get educated. I mean, they need to know what the rules are. They need to know how to do it. They need to know what the fair housing laws are. They need to know how to advertise. They need to know how to screen people, take applications. And that's the big thing is education. Because, if they have the money, they're going to buy the duplex. What do they do after that?
Okay.
Is the question. And so, the Rental Owners Association is very good for that. We teach classes, usually maybe once a month. We have mentoring programs for people that they can come in. They can ask longtime landlords, how do I do this? How do I do that? Maintenance. We have a great group of members that, have been maintaining units for, 40 years. They can tell you how to do that. But the education is the key for them, because if you don't do it right, you're going to get in trouble, and it's going to cost you money.
Do you advise first-time landlords to do it themselves, or should they use a property manager to get them started?
That's a good question. There's advantages and disadvantages of both. If they're first starting out and you don't want to take the time to deal with it, you need a property manager.
Okay, sure. Okay, absolutely. Okay.
You just can't. You're either in or you're out. And you can't do it. You can't do it halfway.
Yeah, that usually doesn't work. Okay, that's really good advice. Either you want to do it, you got to do it all the way, or get somebody else to do it for you. Is it good like that?
Yep. And how are the rules different if you're living on the property with, like, if you have multiple units and you're living in one? How are the rules different than if you're not there at all? There's
no difference except for there are some changes in 608 that allow you to remove somebody if you're living there. It's still a 90-day notice, but they give you that option.
So are they a little more lenient on the reasons?
Well, I think it's just that you're living next to the tenant. So if there's a conflict, you have to have some way to get them out because you're the one that's there. So it, is it a different? Yeah, but it's not much.
Yeah.
You're still, the rules still apply to you. You got to maintain it. You have to do everything right.
And what was the other thing that said that landlords had a different standard if they owned so many units? There's actually some line that the state draws now.
So if let's say that you want to renovate the place and you have to have the tenant out because it's not going to be habitable, then if you have 4 or fewer units, you don't have to pay them that 1 month's rent. So what happens if you do that 90-day notice, you have to give them 1 month's rent at the time you give the notice.
Oh, okay.
So, but if you have 4 or fewer units, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And they just clarified that last year because they said 4 or more residences. Well, is that an Airbnb? Is that a VRBO? Is that a vacation home in Sun Valley? Is that a beach house on the coast?
So what was the answer?
The answer was it's now any residential rental unit that's under ORS Chapter 90. So they clarified that. So the Airbnbs and your vacation rentals don't count.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And the house that you live in as your primary residence?
Doesn't count.
Oh, that's good. So it's 4 rental units.
Yeah, that are subject to the Oregon landlord tenant law.
That's good.
Which is nice because we didn't know, and people I have a house in Florida. Does that count? I don't know.
It might have.
You don't know, and it's like, well, it's not in Oregon, so how can they, but yeah, so thankfully they clarified that little part.
Yeah. Well, they've come a long way then. I would call it, because we're going to be running out of time, if you look at it for the year, okay, the ups and downs of this thing, what do you grade it? I would call it a mixed bag of stuff. I'd give it about a C.
What's that, the law?
Yeah, the law, how it's gone, how it's been like that.
I don't really see any, the only effect I really see is the people that said, I'm done. I don't think it's affected most landlords. They just, okay, this is what we have to do. Let's learn how to do it and do everything correctly.
Okay, all right. That's good. Yeah, what do you think, Alice?
Well, buildings are still selling, and so that's a sign of acceptance, right? We still have some new landlords coming in, especially our millennials, and a lot of them are doing it with their elders, which is kind of cool. I think in the long run, it's going to be harder on the tenants. I really think it's not going to do what the state intended, but we're here to make it as good as possible for everybody. So if you want to buy a building, then we can make that happen, but it's going to be tricky, and sometimes we have to call James to help us through with the tenant, who is still in there.
Yeah, and that happens. I mean, you that happens to you every year, all the time, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. It's not going to just, well, because you've got thousands of rental properties are out there. You say it's 2% sometimes that you have to deal with.
Yeah, do you know how many
fascinating stuff.
How many rental units there are in Southern Oregon?
No, we just keep track of, and I can't remember the figure. We just keep track of the association because we do a roll call every meeting, and it's how many rentals you have, and then what's the vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember. There's probably a couple thousand.
The average rent in Jackson County was something like $1,431.
Mm-hmm.
I read this thing the other day in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. The average rent is $3,700.
Wow.
So certainly, if you're workforce housing and affordable housing or this type of thing, you're getting squeezed out. Absolutely.
Well, that's the thing is it doesn't do anything to make it more affordable.
No,
it didn't do anything. I don't know. I kind of compare it with the healthcare. It doesn't do anything to reduce the cost.
No.
It's just how you pay for it.
It's
which is kind of backwards, I think. But
and they've had rent control in those places for years.
Mm-hmm.
And look what's happened. And boy, we sure don't want that to happen around here. Gosh, that would just be disastrous. We would have nobody left. Somebody moving in from someplace else. Everybody local. As Alice says, are going to go to Idaho or Montana.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they are.
They are.
That's where they're going.
And families are still moving, as you say, to be closer to their families or moving closer to their children. What a huge part of our market that is. But again, it gives opportunities for people to be investors.
It would, but I think
that's really it was great opportunities for people to do.
Yeah, but I think if you're a tenant, then you're vulnerable. And if you're going to be a tenant in Southern Oregon, you just need to be aware of that, because for $1,400, you could have a mortgage, and then you have your own place. You could even maybe own a duplex. So and I'm not just saying that as a salesperson. I just look at the communities that are vulnerable. They're the renters right now,
Yeah,
and I just don't think the law helped.
Yeah, well, you're right. They are vulnerable. I never thought of them in that term, but I think you're absolutely right. So I want to come and see you. What's the biggest thing I got to do if I want to come and see your services? What's the number one thing that people come to you for, James?
Well, a lot of landlord tenants, and I represent mostly landlords, real estate, easements, boundary disputes.
Easements, okay, yeah.
Probate and estate planning.
Yeah, that's about as exciting. There's a lot of stuff going on in those particular areas as well, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're not going to mess around with the taxes. So if they do that, then everything's going to change. But you can't plan for that. I mean,
No.
you can only do so much.
The Oregon Association of Realtors are obviously really involved with this governor's proposed real estate transfer tax.
Taxing the sellers on their
taxing the sellers
on their
when
sale when they sell a house.
We don't know what the percent is yet, but I guarantee you, even though they exempt the first 500,000, that's the carrot out there. That's this is going to be voted upon. But boy, they're going to come after that thing like crazy, which they should.
So what does it mean by it said 500,000 of taxable?
In other words, if I sold a house for 350,000, there would be no tax.
Okay, but
if I sold for 550,000, I'd pay the tax on $50,000.
Okay, but it said taxable income or taxable. It said
I'm
something.
not sure. I'm not. It's like everything else out of Salem. There's no details. Here's this proclamation with no real information.
It really is a proclamation. That's true.
But it sure got a lot of people up in arms. I'll tell you about that in the real estate industry.
I bet.
As you can very well imagine. That's going to do it for the real estate show today. Thanks to Brett and Nance, who handled our cameras for our YouTube show as well. So for James Stout, Alice Lema, I'm Pete Belcastro. Have a great week, everybody, and God bless you all.